Welcome back to Chapter 8. In this video, we're talking about merging and organization. First thing is, let's take a review about what we covered in the last video. In the last video, we talked about some standard basic table tags. For example, your table tag, the border attribute, which is temporary for this case, to just generate the border, the caption tag, what a TR is, introduction of THs, introduction of TDs, and of course the closing tags for all of that. But one thing that we also want to keep in mind is that how do you get the thing at the bottom? How do you get the order total to span across multiple columns? Well, in this case, we're introducing the call span attribute. This is how you can merge cells. This can be used with a TD or a TH cell so that it is an attribute. The call span is basically short for column span. The value is a number, and the number is the number of columns that you want to span, but it only limits to the limit of a table. Let me explain that. Take this very simple table. 3 columns, 3 rows, for a total of 9 cells. Well, for example, we have TD with 1 inside of it. Very simple, right? Well, if we decide to add call span equals 2 to that one cell is going to bump everything else over by 1 column, which means that the numbers 2 and 3 will be bumped over 1 by 1 column. The rest of the data in the table stays exactly as it is. If you were to increase this by, say, 20, then the one cell would span 20 columns, pushing 2 and 3 over far, far, far right. Okay? Let's switch it up. Let's go to this 3 cell, TD3. Well, if you make the call span equals 2, well, there are no more columns, so the table does not know exactly how far to span. There's nothing there to stretch it to because there's no other columns for it to cover. Even if you were to say call span equals 20, it still has no idea where to go, so it only stretches as far as the table can go. Again, if it's an internal cell, such as number 1, it'll stretch over as far as it can. But if it's an external one, it'll only stretch as far as the data goes. In this case, there are 3 columns, and since there are 3 columns, it doesn't have anywhere else to go. Let's go the opposite direction. Instead of spanning columns, now let's span rows. This also can be used for TD and THs as an attribute. The value is a number, and the number is the number of rows you want to span. Again, this only covers the limits of the table. To use our example again with this first cell, we're going to say TD1. We say TD row span equals 2. So that way we're covering 2 rows. In this case, it's bumping down 4 and 7, keeping 2, 3, 5, 6 in their place. But in this case, it's bumping stuff down by 1 row. This can be very confusing when you're trying to visualize the data and how to code it, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But based on this, it's bumping everything down because it has to take up the space for that row for cell number 1. If we do the exact opposite and say TD with the value of 9, and we say row span equals 2, there's no more data to push down, so it has no idea where to go. Even if you were to say row span of 20, it still has no idea where to go, so it doesn't know how far to stretch it. In this case, it just has a row span of default 1. When you're dealing with organization of your rows, you want to make sure that you also add these organizational tags. If you ever browse a website using a developer toolkit, you may see these tags added into the code even though they're not really there. That's because the browser has to organize it based on the data provided. If you help the browser out by adding these yourself, then it makes it a lot easier for the browser to know what information to parse and which not to. For example, let's take the easy example again, with item price, quantity, and total. First thing is, you want to have the top items, or anything for a TH, in a T head organization row. This is not a thread, this is not a header, this is a T head, or table head. I know it can get very confusing with the headers and the headings and the THs and everything else, but what you're doing is specifying the item in the table that is the head of the table, in this case, T head. Next, let's move down to the content or the body of the table, just like you would have the body of your HTML document. All this all this data right here can be wrapped inside of a T-body tag. You can think of any other way to create that, but basically it should just be T-body for table body. Next, we have the footer of the table, or in this case, T-foot. Pretty easy, right? Table head, table body, table foot. In this case, we have the footer of the table for the ordered total, and hey, look, there's our call span right there. And all that is wrapped inside of a T-foot tag. So, with all of that, hopefully you had a general understanding about how to organize the content and how to use column and row span. If you have any questions about this or anything else in Chapter 8, please send me an email or hit me up on Twitter. I'll get back to you the best way I know how.